On today's show, we have an explorer and conservation scientist. She has travelled all over the world with her work and done some incredible expeditions, from cycling across Bolivia to a 5-week trek in the Indonesian rainforest. On today's podcast, we talk about some of those expeditions, and I am delighted to introduce Iris Berger to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Iris, great to have you on the show. You are a fellow member of the Scientific Exploration Society, and I was really intrigued to find out more about your expeditions. But I suppose probably the best place to start is with you and how you got into all these adventures.
So I'm from Austria, so I grew up, right by the mountains, and I got to go skiing and hiking on the weekends. So I think there was always quite a strong connection with nature and sort of adventures on the weekend, even of quite a small scale. But I think the first sort of big expedition I got to do after my first year at university. So I decided to do my undergrad in Scotland and Edinburgh, in biology and ecology, sort of learning more about the natural world. And I was quite keen to have some sort of more adrenaline kick and I guess figure out what my place is in the world, and sort of I guess at that age, being 18, or I think I just turned 19, I really want to sort of test myself and see what I'm actually capable of, because I think I never really had the chance to do it before. So I think diving in and seeing what's possible. But I think once you start off, really another world really opens, and I think what you can do, and actually once you're on the ground, I think you're a lot more, you're capable of a lot more than you think you are before you go. So.
Good to hear that you were at Edinburgh too.
What did you do?
I did landscape architecture, but I suppose having that sort of, with Edinburgh, you have that sort of freedom to explore all around it. You've got the sea, you've got Salisbury Crags, you've got Arthur Steeves. So I absolutely loved my time at Edinburgh. But I suppose your first sort of big expedition out of uni, what was that?
So I combined two expeditions in a way. So after my first year of university, I did cycling across Bolivia. But before that, I just did a sort of research assistantship internship with an NGO in the Peruvian Amazon, sort of collecting baseline biodiversity data, sort of to get an insight on the effect of climate change on sort of the this nature reserve. And flying basically across the world, I wanted to sort of use my time and add a bit more of an adventure component, because I think it was an amazing experience, and certainly learned a lot being in the Amazon and helping out there. But it was very much sort of it was sort of pre-organised, and I was just essentially I had to fly out, and that was it. So I didn't have to push myself that much out of my comfort zone from that sense. So I wanted a bit more of an adventure. So I think I decided to cycle across Bolivia with a guy I met on the internet very last minute because a friend of mine dropped out, so I had to improvise. But that was my sort of first dive into proper adventure.
Did you put out an advert for someone to cycle across Bolivia with you?
Yeah. So I think literally a month before I was out to go to South America, and in the Amazon obviously didn't have any internet signal, so I had to sort out everything before. I literally just posted on a variety of Facebook groups, if sort of world cycle touring pages, if anyone would like to join me, and I think Explorers Connect as well. But eventually this guy from Bolivia, actually, Mario, got in touch and said he would be quite keen, and he didn't quite know whether he would be able to at that point. It was quite nerve-wracking flying out to South America, not knowing whether I actually have someone to cycle with. But he did join, and he was amazing. He was a really amazing expedition partner. It was amazing actually having someone from the country with me as well. But he's from the sort of Bolivia, sort of divided. You've got half of it being the Andes and the Altiplano where we cycled, and the other half is the lowlands where you got basically the Amazon. So he was from the lowlands, so it's actually quite a change for him to sort of be cycling at like minus 20 degrees and dry and a lot of wind. But yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and it turned out my parents weren't so keen, and I told them most details afterwards. But
Yeah, thing. So what was it about Bolivia that attracted you there?
it's quite tricky to say. I mean, because I was flying out to Peru, obviously I wanted to go somewhere, probably to another country that was sort of nearby, and I, just doing a bit of research, it seemed that Bolivia was sort of less touristy. I think it has the highest percentage of indigenous people in South America, and I think just sort of being less travelled to, and because I think that really appealed to me, and having that sort of altiplano and sort of quite a contrast to sort of the Amazon where I was in before. I think just the openness and just we did come across villages, but every three days or so. So it's just seeing the landscape and sort of the wilderness aspect of it, if you will.
Good. And so with Bolivia, I mean, how long did that take you to cycle across the country?
Only 3 weeks, actually.
Oh, pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the thing is, like, once I mean, there was some up and downs, but actually sort of cycling continues in the, on the plateau, so there's actually not too much, altitude to gain, so it's not too...
And so what were the sort of moments along the way? Because by having, what was his name again?
Mario.
By having him, I suppose you had a really good intro into the sort of people of Bolivia in terms of introducing you, spoke their language, and it probably opened up quite a lot of doors. Did you find that, or?
Yeah, definitely did. I mean, I'd say because he's not from the Altiplano, I think there's some sort of, I wouldn't say tension, but there's, they have a very different culture, the indigenous people living on the Altiplano versus of the European ancestry, Spanish ancestry people and living in the lowlands. So that there's quite a big cultural divide, I say, within the country. And I think people were really quite surprised, actually, to sort of, I mean, I'm not saying there are loads of people cycling across Bolivia, but, there are people doing, cycling across the whole of South America, so occasionally you do have people coming, cycling, through the village and coming across them. But I think that for a lot of people, I think it was the first person cyclist from Bolivia they encountered. So it was quite interesting to see, and how they interact as well. I'd say people from the Altiplano are a bit more reserved, a bit shy. I think that just comes with essentially the climate being so harsh, so windy, being so hard to grow anything year round. But I think certainly I could speak a bit of Spanish, but it wouldn't have gotten me very far, I think.
And what were the sort of amazing moments along the way? Because those 3 weeks, I mean, were you a big cyclist before?
Nope. No, I could not change a tyre. I had to sort of get my friend from university sort of teach me how to take off a tyre and repair puncture. I mean, I cycled before, a fair bit just for fun and cycling to uni. But it wasn't something I had done loads before. I hadn't really cycled much, the overnight trips, any of that. So it was quite a sort of learn as you go thing. But surprisingly, we didn't have a single puncture. So we were quite lucky in that respect. I mean, there's so many incredible moments. I think it would be quite hard to sort of pinpoint one. I think just, sort of racing some vicuñas and just... I think really, for me, the overall package is sort of travelling or encountering a country in a way you would never be able to do otherwise. Because, I mean, I've always loved travelling and done it, quite a lot growing up, but I think there was always some sort of barrier and you not really get to know people, or I feel like so we were cycling in the Altiplano. There were quite a lot of, sort of jeeps, there are a few salt lakes around in the landscape. They're really pretty, coming in all different colours, green, bright green, red and yellow, and really beautiful. So you have quite a few jeeps coming around with the tourists, and I felt like you wouldn't really be able to sort of appreciate the landscape in the same way as we did, Yes, it's nice being able to come, just sitting in your car and appreciating not having to be out in the wind. But I think you sort of put another sort of barrier between you and actually really sort of embracing the landscape and the place you're at by just sort of, creating too much comfort for you. So even though it was sort of miserable in bits and We had to camp out in minus 20 degrees, and I think got a bit frostbitten and things like that. I think actually sort of, it's sort of a lot more ingrained in my memory, and I feel I've actually sort of really experienced the place in a way you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah, what is it about Edinburgh? I mean, it was exactly the same sort of situation with me. When I sort of decided after Edinburgh to cycle across America, and again, barely cycled very much, didn't know how to change a tire. After 10 days, I was like, okay, this is amazing. Hopefully I never get a flat tire. And then it happened, and then I spent an hour and a half sort of banging away at it, trying to sort of rip it off. Kind of got a clue. I don't think YouTube videos were out on your phone just about then. But yeah, it's such an amazing way to sort of experience the country. And so from that, I mean, camping out at sort of minus 20 and being frostbitten, that must have certainly felt pretty, not great.
No, I mean, luckily I was quite short. I think it was a few days before we finished, so it was very much, okay, we're almost done sort of thing, we'll get there. But yeah, it was definitely, I think I had to wake up every 10 minutes or something like that in my sleeping bag, just sort of do sort of sit-ups and just sort of keep some warmth. I mean, you probably would take, if you're sensible, a lot more kit, but essentially, because I was a first-year student, not having much money, and I think coming obviously from the Amazon, there was so much limited having to pack for being in rainforest, as well as being at camping out at minus 20, was just like a bit of a challenge. So I think you could do more sensibly in terms of just, taking better kit essentially. But it wasn't too bad. It was quite a contrast afterwards going back to the rainforest where Maria is at, and so the climatic contrast. But yeah, I think that's richness comes with struggles, so I think I'll definitely do it again. So.
Wow. And so with that trip, that was your first sort of big trip out of your comfort zone, sort of pushing yourself. And that sort of spurred on quite a few adventures from then?
After my second year at university, I did a mega transect across Sumatra. So it was actually me and my boyfriend and two Sumatran mountaineers who are absolutely incredible. I mean, they take all the credits, and I think they're currently attempting to do 100 first ascents of Sumatra mountains, which is amazing. But what we did essentially, so we started off in the very northern part of Sumatra called Aceh, and not that many people go there. It's still weirdly sort of on sort of a bit of travel warnings and sort of warning of terrorist attacks and things like that. But these were the loveliest people I've ever met on any of my expeditions. They're just so kind. I mean, it was actually a struggle to sort of move each day because everyone would want to invite us home and just feed us an incredible amount of food. But we started off sort of having about 10 days, 2 weeks in sort of the moss cloud rainforest. And this area is was completely unknown to researchers. So essentially we just did a very simple sort of bird surveys. We were walking each day, but recording all the birds we were seeing. So I think that brought a lot of new challenge with it, sort of it was physically incredibly demanding. I mean, maybe harder in Bolivia, I'm not quite sure. It's just, we managed to walk about sort of 2.5 kilometers at most each day, because we had to, Sumatran team members had to sort of use machetes to cut our way through, because there were no paths or anything. It's insanely dense stuff, but at the same time you have to be really aware of your surroundings, because you don't want to miss a bird, because you have a few seconds to see what species it could be and record it. So I think that's sort of having physically really demanding as well as mentally still having to be with it. I think that was quite a new challenge. But essentially, that was sort of 2 weeks covering a very small area of unresearched forest, and take the first records of the bird species you get there. We also attempted a first ascent, but we failed. Unfortunately, one of our team members, he tried to push his machete down to the ground to rest, but his finger slipped because there was a rock beneath, so essentially it sliced up his fingers down to the bone, and that was also the furthest away we could have been from any sort of road. And so it was during Ramadan, so he wasn't eating or drinking, I have no idea how he did that. And then he used to stop eating and drink completely because I thought it was a punishment. But it was fine in the end. We got back, and he was an immensely tough guy. And then from then on, it was just at that point, just me and my boyfriend. We just walked from this part of Aceh down to the coast for another 5 or 6 weeks or so. Obviously in a far more degraded landscape, but again, still recording the birds. And it was at that point much more about the interactions we have with the villages and sort of more for cultural experience in a way.
Wow. And so with that, you were sort of looking at the birds, and with the sort of deforestation that's sort of going on there, because it's quite a big area for palm oil. Were you looking at this sort of what do you call it? Were you sort of assessing how palm oil is having such a huge impact on deforestation there?
Well, sort of. Not specifically palm oil, and it was more just seeing how landscapes changing, more human impact, palm oil as well being grown, how that's obviously sort of degrading the bird community. But I have to say, that was after my second year at university, so it was very much, the science was rather simple. It was, I hope it still have a very major impact in the sense that it was just an area that was unknown to scientists, so sort of any sort of baseline biodiversity data can have, hopefully a fairly big impact in terms of building the knowledge base. But it was sort of very simple, just essentially sort of looking what's out there. And I think then later on I built more and sort of did more expeditions that sort of more sort of scientific, had a greater scientific focus and more scientifically more robust in that sense.
So your life as a sort of conservation scientist, you are now taking that to a sort of new level, studying your PhD. What is a conservation scientist?
Oh God, it comes in all forms. I think it's quite a broad term, really. I mean, it's just obviously the science around conservation and sort of how acknowledging in a way that we've failed quite miserably, like in the past. I mean, there are all sorts of measures to try and halt extinction and wildlife declines, but we haven't been that successful. So it's really how building the evidence base, like how do you conserve species? Don't go with your gut feelings, go with the science essentially. And where it's a very broad field, but it comes to where is the most biodiversity, where should we have protected areas? But building from what's known now, protected areas aren't going to save all species, and there are a lot of ethical concerns around it. So building more sustainable agriculture that allows species to move between. It's quite varied from sort of behavioural observations to more sort of mathematical models. It's quite a broad field, and coming very interdisciplinary as well. Very much sort of natural sciences, which is more on the side what I do, to social scientists trying to understand the impact a given conservation measure might have on the local community, or indigenous knowledge and things like that. So it's a very broad field.
Where do you sort of see the future of conservation going?
Well, find the balance between not being a pessimist but being a realistic optimist, I guess. I think it basically needs a revolution. I think a lot of people in the conservation field have agreed. I mean, it's changed over time and what the focus is, and there's a lot of disagreement within the conservation community where it should go. But I think everything is clear that what we've done so far is not working, and I think while nature has to become the centre of decision making, or at least a key part of decision making in sort of mainstream economic and business ideas, but at the same time I think there needs to be sort of a change and just revalue how we place nature in our lives and sort of into our interactions with nature, and not sort of having a dualistic idea, humans, wildlife, building a barrier around it. And because I think that was sort of the original movement of conservation, put things in national parks, place a fence around it, so very much fortress conservation, that's sort of the idea of wilderness, ignoring the fact that people were actually there. So with a lot of, sort of colonial undertones to it. So people agree we definitely need to move past that. Then there was sort of movement around how much, should we put a value in nature in economic terms? And now it's sort of, well, who knows where it's going? I think no one really knows, but I think what is clear that we do need to change what we're doing because it's not really working, and like just changing our relationship with nature.
Yeah, I sort of agree. It's sort of figuring out a way of nature and humans to coexist in a way which I suppose puts value on the sort of communities. Because we had Lizzie Daly on episode 16, I believe. And, we sort of spoke in sort of detail about the sort of coexistence between humans and, at the time, the wildlife. But it's a really sort of interesting or pressing concern, which I think, as you say, there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and therefore a lot of people will get annoyed, and a lot of people, no matter which way you go.
No, definitely, and I think because there is quite a big divide. People arguing the conservation movement. I think I've seen a recent Scripter review, about very much in sort of economic, talking about assets and things like that, and there has been outcry by other conservationists. We shouldn't be using these terms for nature. There's an intrinsic value, and we shouldn't go near these sort of trying to price nature as well. So I think sort of marrying all the different sort of streams of conservation will be certainly tricky, and but I think what everyone is agreeing on, that we just need quite a drastic change, not just minor adjustments to what we've been doing before, but really sort of on the massive scale, and readdressing, I think, the drivers of biodiversity loss. So really, let's get rid of capitalism sort of thing, and changing our economic system, and I think food system transformation as well, because agriculture at the moment is still the biggest driver of biodiversity loss. Climate change will come up, and in about 100 years or so probably overtake agriculture, but I think it's just coming to the root causes rather than just really sort of addressing what you see in the ground, and then it comes down to sort of blaming or local communities for bushmeat hunting and using the local forest, whereas really it's sort of the massive big operation driven by demand in the West that's sort of driving deforestation. So I think it's just making sure it's equitable as well.
So when you go on these sort of expeditions to Sumatra, doing your research, how do you prepare for them?
I think it really depends. I think there's no sort of generic answer. I mean, from the boring stuff like sorting out logistics and flights, obviously I think there's sort of a mental component to it as well. And depending what it is, whether there's a physical component, whether I do need to do a bit of training for that. But I tended to not be able to prepare that much as well, in a way that, because of my expeditions tend to be sort of in the summer holidays and exams right before that. So I always feel quite unprepared when I actually go, just because I was so busy revising. But I think the lesson to learn is that it will be fine once in the field. I mean, there's always something you will forget. Don't forget the key bit. But you're not going to always have everything ready, and there are things, depending on the country you're going to, that you'll be able to get there as well.
Well, there's a part of the show where we ask the same 5 questions to each guest each week. With the first being, on your trips, what's the one item or gadget that you always take with you?
It's a bit tricky because I think my expeditions always varied quite a lot in terms of the objective. Is it an adventure-based or very much a sort of science-focused expedition? I think a GPS was definitely quite useful. But actually what I always take is some sort of treat for myself. So I mean, chocolate unfortunately melts, so I would normally take chocolate. But I think it's just some sort of nice energy bar or some sort of, I don't know, something to cheer you up when you're having had a rough day. Some
jelly babies or something. What is your favourite adventure or travel book?
It's quite hard. I don't think I've got one. I mean, I like sort of George Monbiot's sort of early books and sort of environmental investigation, and like on, I think, specifically the Amazon watershed, which is sort of about him being essentially investigating deforestation in Brazil, and sort of being especially sort of in the forefront, what's happening in the Brazilian Amazon on the ground, and a lot of the injustice happening there. And sort of, I think the combination of having that sort of adrenaline kick and like nice descriptive writing with some sort of more, I think, insight about what's politically, historically happening. I think that's sort of that combination. And I mean, that's quite specific because I've done research on Brazil as well. So I think just me always trying to sort of read more around where I'm actually going and the history and things like that in an engaging way. So I think the other book would be Norman Lewis, An Empire of the East, which is sort of his travels in Indonesia and sort of his encounters with his observation he takes and sort of the impact of the ruling Javanese and how it's impacted sort of local communities. And so I think that combination of sort of being able to get some factual knowledge and being able to sort of see the place where I'm going in a different way with sort of engaging good storytelling, essentially.
Amazing. I'll have to check them out. Why are adventures important to you?
I think it's just probably because our world is way too complex for anyone sort of to be able to comprehend. I mean, evolutionary, our brains are not sort of wired for everything. Our globalized, super complex world with an overflow of information, and I think also that capitalism obviously makes us sort of believe we're sort of isolated, competitive, ruthless individuals, and sort of the constant competition, and everything you do is sort of productive. And I think just the over complexity and over stimulus of like our world, where I just sort of striving for some sort of simplicity in a way. And I think I find it quite hard to sort of switch off when I'm at home, so I think I have to really take me out of that environment to sort of very simple task, if it's sort of cycling or each day, just getting from A to B, getting a certain amount of miles done, essentially. I think that's really appealing to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's nice just to take yourself away, leave your mobile at home, just sort of go out for, whether it's a weekend or a week. These sort of adventures that we do sort of just completely takes you from one lifestyle to another, and sometimes the simplicity is just bliss. What is your favourite quote?
I was thinking about that because I don't think I really do quotes. I think it changes all the time, but I think the thing I read on Twitter the other day was by Kate Raworth, the author of Donut Economics. Don't be an optimist if it makes you relax. Don't be a pessimist if it makes you give up. Be an activist and get into action. And I think that's just, especially coming obviously from the conservation background and sort of an environmental background, I think it's, again, talking about the conservation movement, but as a movement to have more, talking about, optimism and, optimism, conservation, and not going away from a sort of doom and gloom narrative, but at the same time, being realistic and the numbers aren't, lying, and we need to do something about it. So I think, personally, I find it quite challenging to find the right balance of, being able to, do something about it and get into action rather than just sort of, be dragged down by what's all the news and things like that. So
it's a switch off. People listening are always keen to go to travel and go on these sort of grand adventures. What's the one thing you would recommend to people wanting to get into adventure?
Go. I mean, it sounds silly, but I think after having done one expedition, well, that being cycling across Bolivia, it seems really easy in a way. I mean, even now when I think about planning another expedition, it always seems quite a bit scary and unknown, and all the things that could go wrong. But I was really surprised how calm and confident you are once you're actually there, and really surprising yourself how you handle the situation. So I think getting the first expedition done is probably the hardest bit you can do, but once you have done that, I think it almost seems very natural to you.
Yeah, I think I was saying in the last episode, it's very much about the planning's exciting, but the start is always terrifying. But literally, as soon as you take the first step, it's, oh, okay, right, we're off.
I was really surprised. I was extremely calm once I was actually in Bolivia. I mean, the the bit was because it was sort of, I had initially planned the expedition. It was Mario who was joining me. But it sounds weird that he was sort of relying, you know, I was doing the planning, the route planning, and where we'd be ending up the next day, where we'd be finding water and things like that. And I was just turned 19 at the time, and you know, he was, I think, 32, and obviously from the country, so it was a bit bizarre for me. But I think because having that sort of expectation almost, I think it made me a lot more, yeah, sure, I can do that. I think he only found out about my age, you know, about 2 weeks in. So, but yeah, I think that, and I guess it's also about finding the right balance of like it being definitely pushing you out of the comfort zone a lot, but obviously still being somewhat feasible. Because I think before Bolivia, the year before, I was kind of thinking, oh, I should do an event. I think I was thinking about walking across South Africa, just having finished school, and I think that was just a bit, you know, a bit too ambitious. Essentially, I think I obviously didn't end up doing it. So I think, you know, doing something that's definitely pushing you, but not completely unrealistic. I think as well.
What are you doing now, and how can people follow your adventures?
Go to Guinea in West Africa in 2020. Obviously got postponed. So hopefully we'll be doing that this year as well, looking into sort of wildlife corridors and West African lions. So hopefully we'll get to do that this year. And I'll be doing my fieldwork and expeditions for my PhD in India as well.
Oh, amazing. Well, I can't wait to follow along and see the adventures you get up to, hopefully towards the end of the year. I think it's starting to calm down a bit now. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
And look forward to following your trips in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video.